So now we move on to our media picks for the month, and you hinted in a previous segment that there's some Pompeii documentaries that I
I was
might
only
have
floating
watched.
it's a possibility.
Well, yes, yes, and I fully meant to watch them. I did, honestly. I meant to do my homework. I did, but I didn't. I didn't do my homework. My dog ate the home. No, he didn't eat the homework. No, because it was. I didn't quite have time to stream them, but we'll talk about those in just a moment. But just before we do, I'd just like to, as my media extension, shall we say, of the month, I'd just like to just revisit a topic that I covered in a video earlier this month, and that is the movie 10,000 BC.
Oh, please. Do we have to?
No. And the reason why I just wanted just quickly touch on it is that I I'd just like to sort of clarify that I don't actually expect all of my entertainment and my media to be historically accurate, um, and I think this is possibly just a good sort of like ship corrector for all of these media segments that we do. But I think what frustrates me about lots of dramas. So, for example, in recent months there was the Troy series and this kind of thing. Is when firm statements are made and they're so close to being historically accurate and therefore being able to be kind of interesting or edgy or making a cool little point, and then they're just dropped like a sack of potatoes because they can fall back on a cliche. And I know. Well, actually, looking back at the videos I did about 10,000 BC, I wasn't. But someone did jokingly say that I was ranting. I wasn't ranting. It was actually quite a thoughtful deconstruction of the movie. But that's not what I'm interested in doing. I don't want to just rant about media and entertainment, because actually one of the things I strive to do on this channel is to be entertaining in some capacity, and sometimes that does mean having a light touch or being a bit tongue in cheek. Uh, it's more just that I think I just get disappointed when I see the potential of something and it's squandered. And maybe that's something that having now said this out loud, and really explicitly, I think it was clear. It is normally clear in my approach to these things, but hopefully we can sort of move forward with that intention. In so much as I just want to see good stories told in as respectful a way as possible, because just as we've been talking about in the previous segments, like with Pompeii and so on and so forth, I think how we present the past has an awful lot to do of impact, and an awful lot to do with what people's expectations of the past are, and also what people's expectations of future presentations are. And it feels as though sometimes we're sort of caught in a bit of a cycle where the assumption is, basically dumb things sell. Don't get too complicated because the audience won't turn up, and yet that's often not the case. We see this in other capacities. People do like to be engaged and on multiple levels.
That's true. And I have a confession to make.
Hmm.
10,000 BC was directed by Roland Emmerich.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
last night I was at a loose end, as you are sometimes in front of the telly, and I was channel hopping, and one of the movie channels was showing another Roland Emmerich film called Anonymous, which is his take on the Who Wrote Shakespeare
Yeah.
mystery. And I have to confess that for a complete load of historical tosh based on flawed thinking and misrepresentation of evidence, it's actually a pretty good movie. It looks great. It's got a great cast, some good performances. It's almost was this made by the man who made 10,000 BC? Really? Now, I mean, it has some absolute howlers, which you can write off as artistic license if you like. But when you're trying to persuade the world that Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare, then you really need to get it right when the play that was playing when the Earl of Essex tried to mount a coup against Elizabeth I was Richard II, not Richard III, as it's shown in the film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's and the people of London weren't shot down by Elizabeth troops on London Bridge like they were the
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana National Guard or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be a little bit overstated in parts of it. but you can still produce an entertaining movie and be talking complete historical codswallop. But
Yeah, and again, this also actually ties in with the very first segment of this month, watching brief, in so much as we touched on this idea of oh no, sorry, the second segment, sorry, the post update segment, this idea of how modern sensibilities and biases play into our interpretations of the past.
yeah,
So for us, an oppressive regime looks like the Louisiana National Guard. It looks like Selma,
yes,
and that's why it's echoed in our media.
absolutely.
And so I can intellectually buy into that as a representation of the feeling, perhaps. But I suppose the question has to be asked in that instance is whether or not people actually felt as though they were being oppressed in that way in London. And that's exactly that's if there's an Occam's razor element here, if there's like a point,
Yeah.
an element, a sharp little distinction that I have to make, it's that question of what's the intention behind that entertainment, and if it's just oh, that'd be cool, okay, that's fine, but don't pretend it's history.
That's the point.
And this is so often the thing that I get annoyed about, but also I think you let slide quite a lot. And so you'll go, oh yeah, but it's just trying to be the new Game of Thrones, and I'm like, well, that's fine, but why do you have to pretend it's history? Why not set it in a just change things and make it
well,
sort of.
it's funny. We were just talking about Shakespeare, but Shakespeare's Wars of the Roses cycle isn't brilliant history. It's fantastic drama,
Yeah, yeah,
and so long as you don't pretend it's history or teach it as history, then that's great. Man for All Seasons is a wonderful play and an even more wonderful film, and it as an evocation of people's images of Henry VIII being arriving on that barge in Thomas More's house in Chelsea, and as played by Robert Shaw jumping down. Shaw plays Henry quite a few years younger than he actually was at the time of his marriage to Anne Boleyn. And physically, he was a much more developed character than Shaw was by that point. Doesn't matter. It was absolutely right for the film to compare and contrast the athletic young Henry with the intellectual athlete Moore.
Yeah. Yeah, but in that instance, actually, again, I appreciate that because Henry saw himself as an athlete.
Yeah.
Because he harkened back to his younger days, but also actually he was also sorry, as far as I can tell, he was also quite proud of his own intellectual achievements as well.
Yes.
So yeah, that as you say, there's a good balance there. I've talked in the past about, for example, in the movie 300, where what we get in that film is a hyper-real, stylized, unrealistic portrayal of the Spartans, and also the Spartan agenda. This idea that they're fighting for freedom. I mean, they had more slaves than most of the city-states.
The entire Spartan culture was based on the helot system.
Absolutely.
System, yeah.
But what we get in that movie is a portrayal of how they would sell themselves to you as the inheritors of Heracles and all this. So Hercules.
You also get a pretty nasty subtext of the Asian hordes descending on Europe.
Yeah, and that's arguably again a very modern thing which has been put into that film.
Well, given that a number of the Persian allies like Artemisians came from Greek states.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, yes, and certainly states with a strong Hellenized culture.
Absolutely.
But I suppose what I mean, and I did it again. I acknowledged this in my review of the 300, is that Frank Miller has a lot to answer for. The comic book artist, he also has some very strong and particular personal issues, I think, that come to play in that film. And so I'm not going. And so in all of that, I suppose what I just wanted just to sort of just take this opportunity, given that I haven't done my homework, just to talk about is that I suppose my philosophy isn't black and white. It's more a case of I want to know what is informing the inevitable grey that we're going to get on the screen. Because frankly, there were no cameras back then. You're not going to get a pure representation of anything. And so when it comes to 10,000 BC, what upset me particularly was the fact that at some point they just made the decision that, oh, well, why can't we have metal? Why can't we just show the pyramids of Giza being built? Why can't we have Mammoth in the desert? That'd be cool. And all integrity was thrown out of the window. And yet, arguably at the beginning, although very stylistic and very much driven by very interesting set design and cinematography, the portrayal of, say, the LGM in Europe, the last glacial maximum, where people are starting to see the weather sort of after that point dissipate, and maybe the mammoth are going away, rang somehow true. It sort of worked, you know. That's all. And it's about the motivations, and also ultimately about how it makes you feel about what you're seeing. And I don't know. If I ever if I ever have to write some sort of philosophy of how I view this stuff, these are the sorts of thoughts that I'll be having, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you look at Stone Age movies, there's really if we go and there's the deliberate echo in the title of the even funnier
1,000,000 years BC. Raquel Welch, 1,000,000 years BC.
Yeah, which was just a camp classic beyond camp classics. You know, so to start to castigate Emmerich for putting the odd pyramid in when which is only a few thousand years wrong. Whereas
sorry. It's not only a few thousand years wrong. I mean, the structure supporting the construction of the pyramids, the agriculture that's required, and all this other stuff is absolutely out of fit for 10,000 BC. I mean, yes, you're right about the 1,000,000 years thing, but frankly, Homo sapiens weren't around then. I mean, that whole movie is absolutely of its time in that instance. But also, notably, I think it's probably worthwhile saying as well that I couldn't actually track down any archaeological consultants for 10,000 BC. So, I was tempted to be particularly frustrated with 10,000 BC because we live in a time when Hollywood does have consultants. For example, on the Ridley Scott movie about Exodus. I believe people like, I think Cara Cooney, was consulted on that one. They made some fairly bad decisions there, despite having a consultant. But they were still sort of somehow being kept on a certain path, and it's just that element of well, also to a certain extent, why the hell do we bother doing what we do if the popular presentation of this stuff is retrograded by 60 years of understanding, and it's that's what I mean by the grey that we get. Of course it's going to be fudged, of course there's going to be grey, of course there's going to be details that look brilliant on camera and that simply aren't going to be compelling to a cinema audience, and therefore decisions have to be made. But it's the public portrayal of the past is important, and lots of people will have ideas about what happened in the past based upon. So I had a conversation the other day with a very clever lady in most respects, and then out of nowhere she just came out with this really bizarre statement about Stonehenge. I won't say what the statement was because frankly it's not worth going into, but it was a statement it belied utter ignorance of that topic. And I think that comes from a generalized sort of what's the word, consent that actually we will consume this history via entertainment, and really the specifics don't matter so long as it's entertaining. And I would say sort of, yes, but where possible we should be a bit more specific. Otherwise, what is the point of knowing more about the past?
It's the point of knowing more about the past is part any discourse that we have.
But is it not also intimately connected with power, with individual,
Oh no,
and
that's a whole watching brief to itself, though, isn't it? Because
societal, an informed society, I suppose, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but an informed society doesn't have to be equally informed about all things. That's the problem, isn't it?
But it also does. But it also shouldn't be actively misinformed.
I don't. Yeah, I'm less concerned that Roland Emmerich put pyramids in 10,000 BC than I am that some politicians deliberately use images that were last seen in the late 1930s, 1940s under totalitarian regimes when talking about immigration, for instance. They use literary and visual tropes that were last used by people like Joseph Goebbels. I'm more concerned about that than I am about some chronological mistakes in a movie.
But that's exactly the thing. It's not a chronological mistake. These two things do intersect. When you look at where expertise and knowledge interacts with the political realm and therefore the public discussion, we have talked about in previous watching briefs. For example, Mary Beard and UKIP having that very public spat, where stuff that he had received from TV and film was informing his decisions.
Well, no, it was Aaron Banks who claimed he could out-argue Mary Beard because he'd seen Gladiator. Let's be
exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that this stuff, how history is portrayed in entertainment, directly informs public understanding and debate of where we are now, how we got to be here, and therefore actually what's okay to show in terms of, say, for example, foreign policy.
Except that because of who he is and the political views that he has, Aaron Banks was being deliberately controversial. People on that area of politics don't do bright, intelligent women who argue with them.
No, but also he in that sense he doesn't. I understand that he doesn't want to have to take the time to learn about the past.
No,
but that's where the entertainment could just be a little bit more accurate, and therefore actually he would. The generalised knowledge would just sort of seep in. I'm not saying his political views would change, but he wouldn't be basing it on nonsense.
Having straddled both worlds, having worked in both the arts and in archaeology, and still to an extent straddling both worlds, I would not want to tie a creative person by saying you've got to be literally 100%.
I didn't say 100%. I didn't. I said what shade of grey.
So what percentage do you allow? That's the problem.
I
fall back on the Shakespeare thing. Richard III, lousy history, fantastic play.
I don't allow a Bronze Age culture to be portrayed in the Stone Age, post-Bronze Age culture. But then again, you get into ironically.
If you believe in ancient aliens theory, of course, the period has been wrongly dated.
No, but you see, then as well, we end up in a situation where people can accuse. Basically, it's what I'm arguably condoning there is a form of sort of benign fascism, that I know better and everyone will follow what I'm saying, and so it is a very sticky wicket. It's a very hard thing to actually untangle. But I just want a bit more of a desire to portray the past in an accurate way, for various reasons, not least because it actually shows that our ideas about the past are changing, and some of that is seeping into, for example, even Britannia. Actually, I mean, earlier this year, was it last year? We talked about Britannia, and as you quite rightly said, actually, some of the stuff that's being talked about there is in fact responsive to our understanding of the past. It's just the broad brushstrokes that were being shown in the adverts that were particularly annoying. That's what interests me, I suppose. And I'm not trying to dictate anything. I just want to see, the good work that we do, that people who work around the world on history and archaeology do, portrayed a little bit more carefully. I'm not even going to use the word respectfully.
You're still sore about The Last Kingdom, aren't you?
No, well, actually, no. Actually, no. I'm not. Well, yes, but no.
Yes, you are.
No. I am. But again, it's just needless. It's needless, not
Yeah.
needless, wrong. Needless misinformation, and you could say, well, it's not the entertainer's job to inform you, but unfortunately, most people, and it's just the case, most people pick up. I heard that this was the case, and then that becomes part of their reality. Again, Aaron Banks, it becomes part of how they perceive the past, and so it's. I think it's important at least to be thinking about. Surely, I mean, I'm not trying to say that there's a percentage or that there needs to be like the equivalent of was it Peter for animals or something coming in and someone with a history book slamming it down on the director's table like, no, you're abusing history. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, just one very, very, very quick point to finish on. I mean, I think there's a French film director, Jean-Jacques Hano, who made a film called Quest for Fire in the 1980s, which did a very similar thing to Emmerich, except that he didn't end it with the pyramids. He took a microcosm of the development of human society in prehistory and turned it into a movie. And he had, I think it was 3 different types of human in the movie. So there was the stereotypical cavemen. There were the next stage on, if you like, in the evolution of society and technology, and a very primitive group of and there they had the Desmond Morris, author of The Naked Ape, who consulted on the body language and and societal issue. Anthony Burgess, the novelist who created the language for Clockwork Orange, created a language for the film for some of the people one of the peoples in the film, and that was an attempt to address the issues at the same time within making a movie. Another Jean-Jacques Hano film, Enemy at the Gates, was based on a sniper duel in Stalingrad. People might have seen it with Ed Harris and Jude Law, which most historians now accept never actually happened, but as an evocation of Stalingrad, it's actually very powerful.
Mm-hmm. And also in that sense, it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. It's the metaphor for the two systems reduced to one person stalking each other through the ruins.
Yeah,
it's a very powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. You're allowed to be creative with history, I think, as well as being absolute with it.
And again, I'm not calling for absolutes. Again, metaphor. There's room for metaphor.
Yeah.
But okay. Now, I'm aware that we've very much talked a lot about this issue now. So, do we have time to just briefly look at your media pick?
I think I could just introduce it very, very quickly. My media pick is The Road to Palmyra, which is a BBC documentary with the architectural historian Dan Cruikshank and the photographer, best known as a war photographer, Don McCullin. It aired earlier this month, earlier in May, in fact, on the BBC in the UK, and it was really an elegy for Palmyra and our views of Palmyra, but also for Syria, but also a sort of really strange sort of rather moving buddy movie about 2 older men exploring this almost post-apocalyptic world that parts of Syria now are after the many years now of civil war. But given moments of real pain and real beauty by having not just somebody who really cares about the history and the architecture, Cruikshank, on board, but having somebody with the eye and the humanity of Don McCullin, who is now, I think he's 82 now, and was climbing over these bomb sites and wreckage. It turned out also, which again added to the humanity of it and the power of it. He had visited Palmyra before, which is why he wanted to go back. He visited Palmyra before and photographed it, and had met Khaled al-Assad, the Syrian archaeologist who was murdered by
Yeah.
uh, Daesh ISIL, so-called Islamic
Hmm.
State.
Hmm.
Apparently for refusing to hand over tell the IS authorities where some of the relics had been taken or were hidden.
Yeah.
Uh, and, and then there's one incredible moment where McCullin sees a shot, but it entails him climbing up a bit further on the roof of this ruined apartment block. And you've got these apartment blocks lining the street, like in the modern city of Palmyra, like they're almost like broken teeth.
Hmm.
They've been blown apart and blasted by both sides, and most of the civilian population has gone, so it's occupied by fighters from the Syrian army, the militias, and the Russian army, who they say they weren't allowed to photograph.
Right.
But McCullin sees a shot, and it's to do with the minaret of the mosque,
Hmm.
and he's helped up onto this higher point by two of the crew, obviously the crew that are travelling with him, because he's 82 and he can't. But he's just seen the angle, he's seen the light, he's got the camera, and he produces an absolutely wonderful photograph.
Hmm.
That, and it's those things when images can actually tell you more. And it's interesting, actually, we started off with, or we dealt with the power of images in cave art. This was about the power of image as well. A cultural image, but also a physical image in the photograph, and the the West's relationship with Palmyra, and as an emblem of the complete disjoint between the ideology of so-called Islamic State and the ideology of most people working in the cultural sector in the West, filtered through these two pairs of eyes. Really powerful stuff, very moving. If you get a chance to catch it either on iPlayer, or if it turns up in other on other systems to be streamed or wherever, The Road to Palmyra, Dan Cruikshank and Don McCullin, BBC, well worth a look.
Okay. Okay. And we'll also put a link below as well to the Pompeii documentaries as well. It was three half-hour programs.
It was 3 hour long specials that were done for Channel 5 with. It's quite an interesting mixed bag of presenters. You had the cultural historian, classicist Bethany Hughes, Raksha Davi, or who people will remember from Time Team, but also John Sargent, who since he stopped being the BBC's political correspondent was being a sort of jobbing presenter, and it was the sort of a mixture. It was trying to relate Pompeii to modern day Naples, people's views of Pompeii, and and obviously leading on the human stories. But it's worth it just to see John Sargent buying and then apparently eating bull's testicles.
I see. I see. Well, actually,
Pompeian delicacy. I have to say.
apparently, yeah, yeah. Something I learned not that long ago, which I was fascinated by, was that apparently Naples, and they may have touched on this, or Napoli, is it Napoli? Naples has or uses volcanic material as paving in the streets, I do believe. So they have sort of cobbles made out of lava. So yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'll definitely, I'll watch that in coming days. Definitely those three parts. Thank you so much for your time this month, Andy, and hopefully you guys at home have appreciated some of the things we've been talking about this month. I think actually we had quite a good conversation there about media and archaeology, and film. So thank you. Okay. Well, I guess all that remains to be said is we'll see you again next month. As ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, Mark.